That spot is reserved for residents, Deborah said, loud enough for the whole cul-de-sac to hear. Not for whoever he thinks he is. My husband Mark stood beside our car, keys still in his hand, his cane resting against his hip. He'd just gotten back from a physical therapy appointment, the kind that leaves him gray around the mouth and needing 5 minutes before he can walk without wincing. He hadn't even made it to our porch. "Ma'am, this is our assigned spot," he said, calm as ever. "Unit 14. It's on the deed." "I don't care what's on your little piece of paper," Deborah snapped, arms crossed over her HOA polo. "I make the rules here, and I say that spot's for compliant residents. You people think a uniform means you get to break every guideline in this neighborhood." 3 neighbors had already stopped on the sidewalk to watch. I was still in the car, phone in hand, mid-sentence with someone Deborah had no idea I just hung up on. She had no idea who she was talking to, or who I was about to call back. "My name's Rachel, and 6 months ago, my husband Mark and I moved into Willow Creek Estates, a tidy little planned community 40 minutes outside the base. Mark is a retired Army Master Sergeant, 2 deployments, a Purple Heart, and a left knee that got rebuilt so many times the surgeons joked they should just bill him for a season pass. He walks with a cane most days now, and on bad days he uses a folding wheelchair he keeps in the trunk. We picked Willow Creek because it was quiet, the schools were good for our daughter, and, this mattered more than people realize, every unit came with one assigned, ADA-compliant parking spot near the entrance. For a guy who sometimes can't manage more than 50 feet without resting, that spot wasn't a convenience. It was the difference between coming home and collapsing on the front steps. What the real estate listing didn't mention was Deborah Halstead. Deborah had been HOA president for 11 years, and in that time, she'd apparently appointed herself sheriff, judge, and decorating consultant for the entire neighborhood. I'd heard the stories before we even finished unpacking. She'd fined the Ortegas $150 for a garden gnome she deemed visually chaotic. She'd sent a certified letter to a family because their trash cans were visible from the street for 11 minutes longer than permitted. She once made a teenager repaint a basketball hoop because the orange was not an approved exterior accent color. Mostly, people just paid the fines and rolled their eyes. Nobody wanted the fight. But almost immediately, Deborah developed a specific fixation on us. Or more precisely, on Mark. The first week, she left a note on our door because Mark's truck, which has handicap plates, clearly visible, was parked in our own driveway at an angle inconsistent with community aesthetic standards. The second week, she stopped him while he was walking our dog and asked, with a tight little smile, "So what did you do in the Army?" "Exactly? Desk job." When he said he'd served in combat, she said, "Well, aren't you lucky it worked out?" I let both of those go. I told myself, pick your battles, we just moved in. Don't be the difficult new neighbor. I should have picked that battle. Because 3 weeks later, Deborah picked a much bigger one. It happened on a Tuesday. I remember because Tuesdays are when Mark has PT, and PT days are always his hardest. He'd pulled into our assigned spot, the one on our deed, the one with the small blue accessibility sign the HOA itself had installed, and was easing himself out of the car when Deborah came marching across the lawn like she'd been lying in wait. "Excuse me," she said, hands on her hips. "You can't park here." Mark blinked at her. "This is our spot. Unit 14. "That spot has been reassigned," she said, "to the Whitfields. They requested it last month for their mother's visits." Mark kept his voice level, which, if you knew him, was already a small miracle. "Ma'am, I have a permanent placard. This unit came with an ADA spot. You can't just reassign it." That's when Deborah's voice went up half an octave, the way it does for an audience. "I don't know what special treatment you think you're entitled to, but rules are rules. Some of us actually follow them." By now, our neighbor Carl was on his porch, coffee mug frozen halfway to his mouth. The Ortegas' teenage son had stopped mowing their lawn, engine idling, watching. Mrs. Petrosian, who walks her poodle at exactly 4:15 every day like clockwork, had come to a dead stop on the sidewalk. "Ma'am," Mark said, "I'm not asking for special treatment. I'm asking you to follow federal law. This spot is required to be accessible." Don't lecture me about law in my own neighborhood, Deborah shot back. I've been HOA president for 11 years. I know exactly what I'm doing. Then you know reassigning an ADA spot without cause is illegal, Mark said quietly. Deborah's face went a blotchy shade of red. You know what your problem is? You people come back from wherever and think everyone owes you something. Well, they don't. Move your car, or I'm having it towed. That was the moment I got out of the car. I hadn't said a word yet. I'd been sitting there, phone pressed to my ear. Finishing a call I'd started the second, I saw Deborah stomping across the grass. I hung up, slid my phone into my back pocket, and walked around to stand beside my husband. Towed, I repeated. You're threatening to tow a vehicle with a valid ADA placard, parked in a spot deeded to this unit. Deborah looked at me like I was an accessory to Mark's crime. And you are his wife, I said. Rachel. Well, Rachel, maybe you can talk some sense into him. This neighborhood has standards. Mrs. Petrosian's poodle chose that exact moment to bark, sharp and disapproving, like it had an opinion too. I tried the reasonable route first. I always do. It's a habit from 22 years of being the person who de-escalates things for a living. Deborah, I said, can we go inside your office and talk about this? I have documentation, the deed, the ADA placard registration, everything. There's nothing to discuss, she said. The board voted. When did the board vote? Recently. Deborah, when? She waved a hand like the question was beneath her. I don't need to justify board business to every resident who doesn't like the outcome. I asked for the meeting minutes. She said they were still being finalized. I asked for the names of the board members present. She said that was confidential. I asked calmly whether this reassignment had happened to any other resident with an ADA placard, and whether the Whitfields, the family supposedly getting our spot, even had a documented need for accessible parking. The Whitfields are a lovely family, Deborah said, which was not an answer. By this point, Carl had wandered over, still holding his coffee. Deb, he said carefully, the Whitfields don't even have anyone with mobility issues. Tom coaches Little League. Deborah's mouth tightened. That's not the point, Carl. What is the point? Carl asked. She didn't answer him either. Instead, she turned back to Mark and, in a tone I can only describe as triumphant, said the line that would end up circulating through the entire neighborhood group chat by dinner time. Look, I don't care what branch you served in or what happened to your leg. I make the rules in this community, and if you don't like it, you can move somewhere that coddles people like you. The Ortega kid had his phone out. I saw it. I don't think Deborah did. You do not make the rules, I said, and something in my voice must have shifted, because Deborah actually took half a step back. The HOA bylaws make the rules. Federal disability law makes the rules. You enforce rules badly, apparently, and right now you're violating at least 2 of them. Is that a threat? It's a fact, I said, and I'd be careful about that phrase. People like you might want to think about who you're saying that to before you say it in front of witnesses. Deborah laughed, short and dismissive. Oh, please, what are you going to do? Call someone. I already did, I said. She rolled her eyes so hard I'm surprised she didn't strain something. Sure you did. Who, your congressman? I smiled, because the timing, honestly, could not have been better. That's when the black SUV turned onto our street. It rolled to a stop at the curb, and 2 men in dress uniforms stepped out. Sharp creases, the kind of posture that makes civilians instinctively straighten up too. One of them was Colonel Reyes, my second in command. He walked straight up our driveway and, without missing a beat, snapped a salute. Ma'am, he said, sorry for the delay. Traffic on the 12. Deborah's mouth opened and nothing came out. Colonel Reyes, I said. This is Deborah, the HOA president. Deborah, this is Colonel Reyes. He works for me. Works for? Deborah looked between us, at the salute still hanging in the air, at the SUV, at the little embroidered eagle on my husband's old duffel bag she must have walked past 100 times without ever really looking at it. I'm Colonel Rachel Ainsley, I said. I command the base 30 minutes from here. Mark's my husband. Master Sergeant, retired, 2 Purple Hearts, and yes, that leg you were so unbothered by happened defending people exactly like you who never had to think about it. Carl actually laughed out loud, then tried to cover it with a cough. I didn't know, Deborah stammered. You didn't ask, I said. You didn't need to know who I was to follow federal disability law. You needed to know that on your own. Colonel Reyes, still perfectly composed, added, Ma'am, for what it's worth, I have the call recording you asked me to preserve, along with the legal aid office's initial read on the ADA violation. They said it's about as clean-cut as it gets. Deborah's face had gone from red to a pale, sweaty white. Mrs. Petrosian's poodle chose this moment to sit, as if settling in for the show. Word moves fast in a neighborhood with a group chat and a bored teenager with a phone camera. By that night, the Ortega Kids video, 31 seconds of Deborah saying, I don't care what happened to your leg, had been shared in the community Facebook group 43 times. The HOA board called an emergency meeting 2 days later. I didn't even have to attend. Carl told me Deborah tried to frame the whole thing as a miscommunication. But 3 separate residents stood up and described their own run-ins with her. The gnome, the trash cans, the basketball hoop. Once people feel safe speaking, it turns out they've been saving up for years. The fair housing complaint Mark and I filed moved fast, mostly because Colonel Reyes had, in fact, preserved a recording, and because ADA violations involving a veteran with documented service-connected disability tend to get attention quickly. The HOA's management company launched its own internal review and, within 3 weeks, Deborah was formally removed as president. Not fired exactly, since it's a volunteer position, but voted out in a landslide 9-1, with Deborah herself apparently being the one yes vote against her own removal. She stayed in the neighborhood, technically. But something changes when nobody waves back at your car in the driveway. The gnome came back in the Ortegas yard within the week, bigger, with a little sign that just said, approved. Somebody, I never found out who, left a small handwritten note on Deborah's mailbox. We know what happened to his leg. Mark got his spot back within 48 hours, along with a formal written apology from the new HOA president, a soft-spoken retired teacher named Grace who, in her first act, repainted every accessible spot's paint bright and unmistakable and posted the ADA guidelines in the community newsletter. Deborah, last I heard, moved out about 4 months later. Nobody threw a going-away party. Here's the thing I keep coming back to. Deborah didn't lose because I outranked her. She lost because she was cruel to someone who couldn't fight back the way she expected. And it turned out he could, because decency has a way of gathering allies you never see coming. You don't need a colonel's eagle on your collar to stand up to someone like Deborah. You just need to stop being polite about things that were never okay in the first place. If you've ever dealt with a Deborah in your own building, block, or HOA, I want to hear about it. Drop it in the comments. And if this story made you feel something, hit subscribe, because trust me, this isn't the last Karen who's about to meet her match.